At this point, everybody knows that Resident Evil 4 is amazing, but could a Resident Evil 5 remake be even better? Well, let's explore that. Capcom has several big decisions ahead of them when making Resident Evil 5. Like, one of the first issues is going to be that it needs to be more of a horror focus. Many people attribute Resident Evil 5's lack of horror to being a co-op game, but if you want a game that is more horror focused, you don't necessarily need to make it a single player game. Like, there's so many examples that I can think of. There's Phasmophobia, Dead by Daylight, there's endless spin-offs. It isn't that Resident Evil 5 is not scary because it's multiplayer, it isn't scary because it's designed as an action game. So one of the easiest ways to establish the new Resident Evil 5 as more of a horror-focused game would be the intro. And so, you know that Lost in Nightmares DLC? Why don't you just slap that on at the beginning? It's set in a mansion, it's claustrophobic. There could be like some design issues that you can work around, but you can like work with those. I'll talk about that later. But rather than just having it be an added DLC to the game, you can have it be the intro to the game with limited supplies, slow-paced horror elements. It would also be a great opportunity to explore how remaking the original Resident Evil would play. They've already remade it once, but remaking it and again, it'll come out in the wash. This section could be expanded. It could have more enemy types rather than just the same old boring axe monster. This will make promoting the game a lot easier because you're going to have multiple settings to put it in. It's not just going to be in one place. That's one of the big issues with Resident Evil 5. It's just set in one location and it's a specific demographic. This kind of gets you away from that. You can have more zombies in it. Adding zombies would help a lot with that controversy. I'm not going to go into much detail about that. There's many ways to avoid this and many ways to fix it. Resident Evil 4 was an issue, Resident Evil 6 was an issue, and there's specific reasons why those weren't. If you want like a more detailed explanation of that, I can go into that, but not in this video. We're focusing more on how we can make it an awesome game. Okay, now that marketing is out of the way, let's get back to the fun stuff. Let's focus on the remaking and reimagining the game. The beta for Resident Evil 5 was very exciting, and many fans want to see the game remade in this way. There's a lot of value there because the game was much more horror focused. That's kind of the goal of this video. But I think that it was switched due to executives at Capcom wanting bigger numbers. It's not unknown that they wanted to compete with the likes of Call of Duty. Resident Evil 5 isn't a bad game by any means, but it's missing some of the heart of other Resident Evil games. The Resident Evil team has had their finger right on the pulse of horror and fear lately. Just look back at the past several years of Resident Evil games. Nearly every game is well balanced and has a mix of action and horror, with some games leaning one way or the other. Short list of moments that I can think of off the top of my head would be Resident Evil 2 and being chased by Mr. X. Resident Evil 3 has some scary moments. Not really. Village and the Baby. Good lord. Village DLC and the Mannequins. Resident Evil 4 and the Regenerators. I don't know if that's exactly how you say that. I'm just rolling. So looking at Resident Evil 2 as an example, we know that Capcom can do a claustrophobic gameplay really well with zombies. Resident Evil 5 could do that, and it would just be, ooh, chef's kiss. Expanded this section would go so far. Make it like Spencer Mansion. It is obviously a callback in the original with Chris and Jill running through a mansion after Wesker. Also gives you more experiences in preparation when going to remake Resident Evil Remake of the remake again. But how to expand it more? Well, hold on. We need to get a gameplay choice out of the way first. Is the game going to be single player or multiplayer? What would you want? The beta obviously was, and single player is more scary, right? Okay, well, share your opinion. Anyways, Capcom going with a multiplayer approach would be a gold mine. Lord knows the sales of Resident Evil 5 and 6 were amazing at the time, and 5 and 6 still have more sales than 7 or any of the remakes. So let's keep the co-op, but how can you fix that? The issue with co-op in Resident Evil 5 is that you have to pretty much hold hands through the entire game. And being in good company just takes away that horror experience. When you are next to someone in a game that is horror, it's lessened. But even if you're in a call with them, it still has an effect. But if you're standing right next to them in the game, it has even more of an effect. So picture you're inside by yourself and your friend is outside and you're alone in this haunted house and you're trying to get away and they're yeah, we're yelling at you really far away. That would be huge. So if you can separate the players, it adds anxiety, it adds fear. It's oh my god, I need to get back to them. There's all these mechanics that would just feel great. In Resident Evil 5, it's kind of oh, stick together, we're partners. Pull the lever, push the button together, we're partners. Yeah, no, we need to cut some of that stuff out. Yes, you can keep the theme of being partners, but you don't need to hold hands the entire game. It's how often are they partnered up in the original Resident Evil? I mean, Chris and Jill have their own separate campaigns. Where did this partner thing come from? All right, we gotta stop there. That does lead to another option, though. They could go that route and have 2 separate scenarios, Chris scenario and then Sheva scenario, but if we are including the DLC as the start of the game, that changes some of the things also. So like number 1, that changes that it's like first player and second player scenario, Chris campaign, and then Jill, Sheva, and Josh campaign. Alright, back to the intro. Having more explorability and separation could lead to more moments of horror in the game. Like having a stalking character that is near indestructible could be terrifying too. This has been done well in the previous games. So like you can team up and go together, or you can split up and try to get through. This could be messy game design, but there's ways to fix this. Like the general idea would work though. Like you can polish this. Polish is like what's going to be super important to this game. Like if you polish it, make it feel really nice, spend some time on it, don't rush it out, don't do like Resident Evil 3, it'd be great. So if they avoided that and just kept having forced moments of separation, it could be good as well. With multiplayer approach, the AI would need to be improved, and you could select your character as well, so you could get 2 different experiences playing as either character as well. Limiting ammo in this section and having save rooms would also be like ideal. Like having save rooms and like checkpoints of like little safe areas really creates a contrast of like, okay, you're able to ramp up and then ramp down, and just creates like a nice, tune. What's the word I'm looking for here? It's like rhythm, or nice rhythm to it. That's it. So we're keeping the typewriter, we're keeping the inventory management from Resident Evil 4. Keep or add a new merchant, we need a merchant, and use the Resident Evil 4 Remake upgrade system. It works so great, and it just needs to be kept in the game. I see why they did it for Resident Evil 5, making it at the end of chapters, and so you're synced up and it doesn't like stop gameplay, but like having the freedom of each player to kind of explore and not like stop every time the other player has to do something, you can do that. It works. There's just ways around it. Gameplay is modernized now. There's been many co-op games that have done this. Many. Okay. In the main game, having Sheva as a partner would still be ideal. But same idea here. Add sections where the characters are separated. Mechanically change how reviving works. It may be best just to remove reviving. When playing single player, though, keep the same mechanic Ashley has. Like, you can make it to where they get down and then you can get them back up. Like, single player needs to be optimized. I think it was like... So originally it was like the original plan, but then afterwards it was like, okay, we're just going to throw in single player just so people can play it, and we'll throw in like the most basic AI we can. I'm sure they like worked on it a little bit harder than that, but it just doesn't feel great. It feels pretty awful to play this game as a single player game. So one single player issue is that you are constantly waiting on Sheva or managing her. So optimizing the single player experience, like I said a minute ago, would be great. You shouldn't have to think about Sheva at all. She should be able to handle herself. She's a grown-up adult. In the game, she's like 23. She can handle herself, dude. She's been trained. There's so much going on there. And Sheva and Jill and Josh, same thing. They're all experts. They should be self-sufficient, and they should not share resources with you. Man, that was a hard one. Too many S's going on. The way they implemented Lewis should be the way that the single-player experiences felt. In Resident Evil 4, obviously, the remake. Lewis is there to help, doesn't hinder your experience, doesn't cause you game over for him failing, and is helping you out. I mean, Ashley does, but with Lewis, that's perfect. What about the issues with multiplayer? One of the issues here is having to have checkpoints that each player is at together, hitting the come on button until your partner eventually decides to catch up and you just keep spamming it. The game shouldn't encourage you to stay together in contrast to the original. Remaining independent and splitting up should be the approach for this. What if one player is downed? This is a good point to stop and contemplate. Let's think about this. Rather than having unlimited revives for a partner, there should be a specific resource for the partner to revive them out of the dying state. They could have it for themselves or for their partner, but they should be limited. Being able to have unlimited revives for you and your partner keeps you staying right next to each other, like in harder difficulties, and just isn't great game design. And remove the usefulness of herbs. It just completely removes it. Re-including yellow herbs as an item and adding adrenaline shots would be great. In easy and normal, you could remove the adrenaline shots as a resource to make the game easier, but I wouldn't recommend that. Another issue is inventory management. So if you're going to pause. One of the reasons that the inventory was switched as a simplified version is probably because they didn't want the game pausing every time one player paused. This is a hard issue to get around. One way to solve this, though, is to have a handshake system. So rather than being able to open up your inventory and pause the game just whenever you want and the other player has no control over it, both players can click a button to enter into inventory management. Now, this shouldn't be all the time, but when you're in combat, this should be something like a handshake system. Not you're shaking hands, but both players press the Y button or the triangle button, and then they can go into the inventory. There should also be the quick access menu that's been in all the recent remakes, but having the system for specifically when players are in combat to get a pause could help. Or you could just keep the system, but have it not pause the game, and when players enter the menu, they just get like fricked up. When reaching a checkpoint or trying to open certain doors, there is a check to ensure that both players are at the same point and are ready. This is unneeded, as it like assumes that players are not going to coordinate. Like, okay, you're not going to go to the door yet. You got to both be at the door. Like, maybe it's like a gameplay thing, but it's just really not needed. The dual doors should be used minimally rather than every chapter in each section. Like, you can keep them in for some points, but like have them be fun and engaging, not just like a okay, we gotta wait here, and it just stops the flow of the game. It doesn't feel very natural. There should be more separations rather than forcing players together. There are some optional sections where the lighter player can be boosted to a different section. Some of these sections could be mandatory. I mean, they were like mandatory, like where Chevy gets like boosted over to the other building, and then there's like the section where you have to deal with the lickers. We need more of those sections. Like, they work really well. And like they increase like, okay, I gotta rush to get out of here. I gotta get back to my partner, because like if I don't, I'm dead. This could be expanded further, though, as well. Certain chapters could have both players removed from each other's games to complete a section alone. I get this could be like a little controversial and maybe like hard to implement into the game, but like if you have like a chapter where you're both alone and like, all right, I'll see you in like an hour, and you come back together and like knock it out, that could be cool. I think there's a way to do that. More mechanics would be great to carry over from Resident Evil 4 Remake. The parry system feels great and should be implemented. Implementing a similar dodge system in Resident Evil 3 would take it one step further. Like in Resident Evil 3, it's pretty good. It's not that great. Like she kind of just like falls over sometimes, but like when you can like do a dodge roll, it shouldn't be Dark Souls, like that's too far, but like having some sort of dodge where you can like get out of the way of an attack that you know that's coming, and if you time it well, you can dodge it. Also parrying it. Visually, the game still looks great. I mean, like, if you look back at it, like, you can see, like, in the cutscenes, like, they're doing acrobatics, they're diving, they're doing all kinds of stuff. Like, why can't they feel a little more athletic through the gameplay, through, like, the control feel? Stealth is a big part of the new Resident Evil 4 as well, and adds more diversity to the gameplay. One aspect that doesn't feel good is not being able to focus weapons. Like, you cannot aim in that game for anything. Like, I feel like I'm pretty decent at aiming in games, but there's like two different mechanics that are keeping you from aiming well. There's like the hit detection, it's off a little bit. There's like being accurate by like keeping your, like, not aiming at all and like moving at all. So like there's two different things that are like keeping you from aiming well. Now, like, lasers shouldn't be an attachment on every weapon as they are in the original Resident Evil 5, because we want to, like, make every weapon feel, like, not that great at the beginning. But as you upgrade it and add things to it, like, it starts to feel amazing. Like, that upgrade, that dopamine hit, oh, that feels good. You want a lot of that. You want a lot of that. Better death animations is also, like, hugely important. One of the things that like gets people into this game is just watching the death animations, like seeing Leon get like torn apart, blown up, falling down a pit, getting stabbed, like all those things back in the original Resident Evil 4, like that got so many people into the game. If you could add some stuff like that into the game, like Resident Evil 5, that would just, it would hit so hard. Let's talk about Wesker real quick. You know he's the main villain of Resident Evil 5, it's no secret, but expanding his role by having more inclusion in the opening of the game would like be so good for him. He just kind of shows up, he kills Spencer, it's like, who really cares? You could expand that a little bit more, give him some development, maybe have him be the person stalking you throughout the Spencer mansion. That could be cool. But it's like, is Wesker really scary with all that hair gel? I don't know. Maybe put a tyrant in there, something just chasing you around, like, okay, zombies, hunters, there's so many options there. And like, I brought up lickers earlier, and they're a great horror element in Resident Evil 2. And they're in Resident Evil 5, but like having them be deadly is what makes them so terrifying. In Resident Evil 5, they're not that deadly. They just kind of stick their tongue out into your chest and you just rip it out, and then, you know, you're fine, and they can dive on you as well. But if you like don't hit like the button like 500 times in like 2 seconds, then they like stab you through. But your partner can save you too. But giving them like instant kill potential, like, ooh, that just creates intense anxiety. And it's also super annoying, and like speedrunners hate it, but it adds some like feel to the game. You maybe create a way you can parry it, like telegraph it a lot so that you can like deal with the mechanic. It's not unfair, don't have it be cheesy. Like you don't want the game to be cheesy now. Like cheesiness is not fun, but like having like one hits is okay if you don't make them cheesy. Level design is also an area where they can improve the game. It's a pretty linear game, like there's some options for like different routing and like finding like hidden items and stuff, but in Resident Evil 4, like they did this really well. Like if you're speedrunning the game, you can just go. You don't have to turn anywhere, you can just keep going, you can get the game done in like under 2 hours, obviously, if you use like the skip that's been removed. So just add options for backtracking, add those like hidden bosses that you can go back and fight, keep all those mechanics that were in Resident Evil 4. They worked really well in the remake. And then you also have the opportunity to like travel back to certain sections, and like it just creates like more feeling that you're like in this world, and it's not just like, okay, I'm just on this train and I'm going through everything. Make it feel a little bit more open. We don't want open world, but you know, you want a little bit more open. So Reapers are by far the most terrifying enemy in Resident Evil 5, and they are really tough to deal with. But like a well-placed shot just takes them down. Really 2 well-placed shots. And the issue is that you have to relax. Like you can't just start spamming bullets at them. If you shoot a machine gun at them, you're not going to be able to hit anything. You're going to have smoke everywhere. They're going to be coming at you. You're going to get stabbed, and then they get instant killed. It's not going to be a fun time. But one of the things that like could be improved here is the setting and like the music surrounding the Reaper. The Reaper's like in an industrial like factory area, and it's not really that creepy. Like you see some like egg sacks on the ceiling, and like the music's kind of like, oh my god, it's kind of scary. But like if you like make it like to where it's just like, I don't know, you fall in a pit, and like you're trying to crawl, there's some bugs and stuff, and it's like you hear that noise come up from behind you, and you like turn your flashlight, oh my god, it's a Reaper, and it's like already about to stab you, and you both like try to run away, and then like you split up, one person falls down a hole. Like you see how that can work really well and like get like both players like really terrified, because like if you have like more mechanics in the game to split you up, don't overdo it, don't overkill it, but like just having some sections where you're not standing right next to each other can like really induce some horror. So that's just some of my thoughts on like the Resident Evil 5 remake. We know it's coming at some point. Veronica may come first. I'm not talking about that. I know more about Resident Evil 5. I have no idea about Veronica. It looks like a great game. I watched the cutscenes back in the day when I was super obsessed with the series, but seeing a remake would be fun. I would play it. I'd love to see it. But for Resident Evil 5, I think there's a lot of opportunity here for Capcom to like really hit this out of the park. They could possibly like rush it and do it like Resident Evil 3 and like ruin it, and that would just be awful. But I think if they polish it, put in some time, take some time to like kind of think through like how they can really introduce the horror element and like maybe use some of these ideas, you know. I mean, you know, who knows? Maybe they like take a look at some of these YouTube videos. I mean, this one's probably going to get like maybe like 20 views. Who knows? But if you enjoy the content, you know, whatever. I don't care what you do. I just wanted to put this out there and like make sure my voice was heard. Anyways, that's it.